All right, guys, welcome back to RC Every Day. So, get ready for your Bud Light Real Men of Genius salute. I've solved the ride height issue on this new rat rod. So, realized I'm sitting here looking at it, doing my normal sit and stare brainstorm session. Totally didn't want to make a video tonight. I still have another one to go edit. So, it is what it is. Got to looking at this. The 4-link truss was keeping the chassis about a ½ inch away from the axle. And that's, that's why ride height looked good where it was sitting on the frame. But I needed some up travel from that point. So I got thinking, what can I do to get rid of this 4-link truss? Put it on the bottom. So I've got a spare one here. You can see how tall these things stick up. And it has the other brackets to mount the lower 4-link mount. And the part up here is your upper 4-link mount. So instead of our upper 4-link mount, it's going to be our really low 4-link mount. And I think that's going to add to the awesomeness of this chassis. Have this beautiful axle, this awesome frame rail, all this nice, beautiful hardware, scale body mounts, and this weird looking setup in the back. And I think I've got an idea for rear shocks too. We'll see how it plays out. But I've already flipped it around. I've got the axle setting real nice and low, and I think we're all going to love the ride height. One problem. Bottom of the axle is not made for that to bolt to, and obviously it can't because the diff pumpkin is taller, so we need some spacers. But this axle does not have a place to get a round spacer in there, so we would have to cut down some little spacers. I've tried it before. It's a disaster. But luckily, since I've got all this stuff together and kind of know where things are now, when I did the tiny truck nuts flip axle or transmission flip on the TF2 Blazer, he sent along his axle flip kit. I did not use that because it's a Chevy and I didn't want to go leaf under axle, but I've got them. So let's take a look at those. So these are a 3D printed piece, and I need to make them a little deeper. They don't go quite around that K44. So we're going to Dremel that out and hopefully not break them because they are printed. It's going to be a little delicate, but we just need something in there to reinforce that and keep that square to the axle and keep all of our geometry where we need it. And I think it's going to work beautifully because we're not really changing any of the angles. So it already worked weird because it's not designed for a whole lot of function. With having those really long arms and really short arms, basically your pinion angle stayed parallel with these. So however the pinion angle sits when we bolt this on, that'll be where it is in its range of motion, which we don't need much. ½ an inch would be plenty of suspension travel with this. These shocks aren't going to give us much more than that. They're going to look awesome. Up front, I noticed we're sitting on the steering arm. If I space that further away from the chassis, that'll get us a little bit more travel. We could get by with that as ride height. I'm not going to mess with it yet, but we can always swap on one of the drop axles. I don't have any more of those at the moment, so we'd have to steal the one off of this project. But yeah, those are those custom ones I get on eBay. I don't have a clue who makes them. They're $50, and they give you a drop lower. So yeah, let's get this show on the road. we accomplished what we were after. Got the ride height. The chassis is setting very level. The rake to the front is mainly due to the tires. I think if we had even tires, it would set pretty level. The rear can go down just a hair more. You saw I started to notch out the frame, kind of do a little C-notch, and but we're hitting the body mounts now. So we don't really need to go any lower because I test fit the body, and I think we're going to be pretty excited about where this is at. So up front, I just put some spacers in, added some scale hardware. Back was definitely a challenge. Watch our axle movement here. So we're not going to have any more travel than that on this, and it keeps our pinion angle pointed in the right direction, and it may allow us to keep that cross member because now we're well over it, and yeah, things are just jiving pretty well. So let me flip it upside down and show you the bottom end. I just love these little jack stands for this kind of stuff. It's awesome. So I used those tiny truck nut mounts, and I didn't want to have to fool with the back, so I just cut them and scored them and broke them off. They didn't break evenly, but it worked. I had a lot of challenge with that. This axle was not drilled all the way through on all four sides, and then I got some metal in the threads, so I had to like kind of clean the threads, and yeah, it was a challenge. I had to find the right size bolts. I started out with really long ones thinking I was going to go all the way through, and I didn't have any that were quite long enough. I mean, I had some that were way too long, and I didn't want to fool with nuts and washers. It's threaded inside, so I just had to find some longer ones here to go through our now our lower 4-link mount through the bracket into the axle and not go too far, so that we can still tighten up our now upper 4-link mounts to the axle as well. I use some very short scale hardware for that, which is good because I never get to use the little bitty stuff that much. I'm not in love with these 3D printed pieces in here because it doesn't look the best, but it's doing the job for right now. I don't really know another solution because it's such an odd shape. That was the only thing that I can fathom that was even remotely close to fitting in there. But it's definitely not going anywhere. These screws are a lot longer, and they go halfway into the axle housing. The other ones are tiny, and they get in there the majority of the way, and they all get real close to touching. My idea for the shocks, let me flip it back right side up. This suspension just keeps getting more and more radical. So as I mentioned in the previous video, I have some more 50 mil shocks coming. So I want to keep them as low profile as possible. There is absolutely no way to use these mounts out here on the axle without being up high, crawler-esque. I mean, it's just too much. So I have these mounts here, which don't really give us a whole lot of option. I don't want to start getting into interior because that has the full floor. So we got to keep this thing as low pro as possible. So my original thought was to use this, our upper, lower, panhard, or whatever, that thing that we moved to the bottom. So if we go a 50 mil and we give ourselves a 1/4 inch of ride height, that puts the shock pretty low. That'll be 10 mil shorter than that, so it'll be right at the bottom of the eyelet. But we'll have to find the world's longest bolt to put through there to hold 2 shocks, 2 arms, and space everything, because we need our shocks. We don't want them all the way inboard. The shocks work better the further outside they are, so we need them around about here, and then we can have something off the chassis where we can bolt them up. But you're going to love the ride height on this thing now, I think. And also, another side effect of all this, the wheelbase is extended a little bit more. So moving that mount down, we had our pinion angle set, so it probably brought the rear axle back another 4 millimeter or so, just eyeballing. So I did have to come back in with some more 5 mil spacers. So this is a 100 mil rod. We got a 6 mil spacer in the front, 5 mil in the back. Got our pinion angle spot on. And I was worried because I want the rear of the frame to be at the edge of the body. And it's pretty close right now. It's just a hair under it. But that creates a whole different look out front. And I think again, we're working on getting this hood grill set up on there, and it looks fantastic. So let's take a look at that. Check out the proportions on that. So now we have our full frame horns exposed like they would have been on the real car. Front cross member that looks nice and pretty. I know the hood and the grill are not really holding themselves together yet, but the proportions look way better. Look how tight our tires to our wheel arch. Raise it up a 1/4 inch. We got suspension We got everything we need. I don't think we need to do the drop axle in the front. I think that's going to buy us just enough. Just got to figure out some cool shock mounts. Let me show you out back. You can see the frame horns sticking down. They were flush with the back of the body, so that's probably about 5 or 6 millimeter. We've moved it back. I'm okay with that. I can live with that. The more we go with this, the more tied we are to this body. Obviously, we've got body mounts, and so we're pretty well set on using this one now. You can see there, we talked about some of the uneven pieces. This is printed in sections and glued together, so it may have to get a little more aggressive with our sanding. I'm gonna try some other, I've got some real good high build primer. I was talking with my group of RC enthusiasts, and they recommended that. And 110 Rod Shop gave me that can of that. It's a H-Pole 5, I don't know, some fancy high build primer. So we're gonna try that on that next. Do some sanding, and yeah, I'm digging this though, because now we've got a little bit more space back here. Before, when we first started this, the firewall was at that cross member. So now we've got the body back almost 3/4 of an inch after iteration and iteration of that. But the main thing is the ride height. So we're gonna keep that tall boy look, that high boy kind of stance, but it's not gonna be cartoonish. This is what it looked like. When I added the ride height to it in the last video, it looked very, very cartoonish, and I hated it. I don't want a caricature of a hot rod. I want a real hot rod. And I think this, we got to cut the grill down some more, slight rake on it. I think we have enough out of the hood to get the right rake. And yeah, a body that actually bolts to body mounts. Now we got to start thinking about motor transmission, but really we've got to get the suspension set. Those shocks should be here hopefully by the end of the week. I got them on sale with RC 4 Drive. Use some of their Black Friday weekend, Cyber Monday sales, and I got 3 sets of those 50 mil shocks. Still cost me $100 and some odd, but they are nice shocks. I absolutely like them for this purpose. But up front, I don't know. I think up and down is just going to look the best. I don't know. Just don't know. We got to wait till the right idea strikes us a certain way. I don't know if anybody's interested in this build. It didn't seem to get a whole lot of attention when we started it. I don't know if that was just because I didn't really have the setup to do it at the time, but I am brainstorming that while it's here in the background. You can see I've got the chassis up here. I've kind of been building it in my head. When I get stumped on this one, I move back to that one and do some brainstorming, and got some plans for that. But comment below if you're interested in seeing that one, because I don't know, it just hadn't gotten a whole lot of views. People aren't feeling it, I guess. Maybe it's too similar to the other builds. Maybe that's why this one's taken off so well. So we'll see. But you know, I was trying to do something different, but I do absolutely love that style over there. That is me. If I build one in real life, it will most likely be that way, not this way. Knock the hood off. As far as engines, I don't know yet. I keep mocking it up with this little 4-banger that I've got. Completely out of the question for this. It looks cool because it's kind of, I mean, these had little flathead 4 cylinders in them originally, and it is what it is, but that's out of the question because we have no space. We can't hide a transmission. We can't hide a 540 motor unless it is in the engine bay. We are already going to be dying for space because, I mean, we have to do a full interior. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We have the technology. So all of our electronics are going to have to go in this little cavity here. So I don't think a 1060 ESC will fit. We could probably get a 1060 and a receiver back there, but not a battery. I've got some very, very small Helios, but I am still partnered with Helios. So if we need something even smaller, I can hit those guys up and we can find the right one for the job. But I am digging it. Looking underneath here, you can see the suspension. You can see the wild, long suspension arm. I think this is moving in the right direction. But that wraps it up for this video, guys. I wasn't planning on even making a video today, so here we go. We got a lot of editing to catch up on, but we're gonna end it here. Appreciate y'all watching. Get out there and do something with the hobby. Keep it scale, and I'll see you in the next video.